2020 was supposed to be an amazing year for the theme park industry. Key phrase, supposed to be. We all know what happened. But even with the pandemic, I was still able to do most of the parks I had planned to do before all the mass chaos began. I had originally planned to visit at least 20 different parks in 2020, but ultimately only got to 15. But I consider myself lucky to have visited the parks that I did. I also got 23 new credits in 2020, bringing my count up to 404. So even with a late start, I still picked up more credits this year than in the last 3 years combined. With all that being said, I thought I would look back at the best and the worst of those new credits. These are my 5 best and 5 worst new credits I picked up in 2020. My number 5 worst new credit is Tigger Coaster at Indiana Beach. I want to preface this by saying I didn't ride too many bad coasters this year, and having this on here is proof of that statement. Tigger Coaster is the only Schwarzkopf Jetstar one in North America, and I'm happy to have this credit. But I guess I was expecting the same level of intensity as Jetstar 2 at Lagoon, and I didn't get it. It has 2 low-to-the-ground turns that have decent positive Gs, but other than that, there's a lot of wandering around on this ride. If I had lower expectations, this probably wouldn't have made this list. My number 5 best new credit is Steel Hog at Indiana Beach. We're back at Indiana Beach for this very quirky coaster. This was the first ever SNS El Loco, and I'm happy I finally got to ride one. After riding this, I can safely say I like these more than the Gerstlauer Eurofighters. The main reason is the wonky elements this ride has. Even though this ride has pretty dumb shoulder pads, my head did not find them once, so they didn't bother me too much. Aside from that, this thing packs a punch. It has bank turns, outer bank turns, and a couple of inversions for good fun. I was so impressed with this ride that I have no shame calling this my favorite coaster at the park. Sorry, Cornball Express. My number 4 worst new credit is Arkansas Twister at Magic Springs. Magic Springs was certainly a disappointing park as a whole, but Arkansas Twister takes the cake as the biggest disappointment of the day. I got 2 back row rides. And even though I thought the ride was smooth, it was pretty forceless. No airtime, no positive Gs, a tiny bit of laterals. In reality, it just wandered around with shallow drops and has possibly the worst designed camelback hill of all time. The one that runs right alongside the lift hill. If you've ridden this, you know what I'm talking about. The Gerstlauer wooden coaster train certainly didn't help. And the light trains is probably what caused the coaster to valley with people on it the day I was there. So it doesn't even run all that good in the first place. It's just so slow, and it just crawls through the layout. So in general, this is a pretty big snooze fest. My number 4 best new credit is Texas Stingray at SeaWorld San Antonio. I did not expect this to be my favorite coaster at the park, but it was, and it wasn't even a contest. I honestly didn't know what to expect with this new for 2020 GCI. Earlier reports before the COVID shutdowns had people claiming this as a top tier GCI, but more recently, people have started to see this as just run of the mill. I got 2 rides on my visit, and thought it was a middle of the road GCI, and a mid-tier GCI for me is still an awesome coaster. That's how much I love their creations. It may not be in my top 50, but it's close. The first half has some really good laterals and some airtime, while the second half is basically just laterals all the way to the station, but at least it has great pacing. This was my 400th coaster, and I'm more than happy to have this take that title. My number 3 worst new credit is Hoosier Hurricane at Indiana Beach. Going in, I knew this didn't have a great reputation, but I wanted to give it the benefit of the doubt because it got some track work done during the off-season. Plus, the ride has buzz bars, and who doesn't love those? However, after I got off, I couldn't help but be very disappointed with this CCI from 1994. It has a simple out and back layout with several airtime hills, but none of them provided any airtime. And the bottom of some of those hills were pretty brutal on my behind. It has a great setting over the water, but at the end of the day, I thought this was the weakest coaster at Indiana Beach. My number 3 best new credit is Boardwalk Bullet at the Kemah Boardwalk. I was so impressed with this Gravity Group wooden coaster in the Houston area that I'm willing to put it in my top 50. Even though some people who've ridden it recently have gushed over this ride. I thought it was solid, but I'll admit I wasn't impressed at first. The more I look back on it, however, I can appreciate the ride for what it does. It's stupidly compact, taking up just 1 acre of land, and it has a long twister layout with tons of crossovers and laterals. And it rides fairly smooth despite its uncomfortable PTC trains. It has decent floater airtime, but I guess my expectations were that it would be this crazy ejector machine sitting by the Gulf of Mexico. I was wrong about that, but it's still one of the most out-of-control woodies I've ever ridden, so I had to find a spot for it in my top 50, and it easily was one of my favorite credits I got this year. My number 2 worst new credit is Wildcat at Frontier City. Okay, this coaster was pretty boring. I rode it in September of 2020 in a slight rain, but that didn't take away from the fact that this ride has a dumb first drop, awkward track profiling, and even though it has a great wooded setting, the out and back layout delivered nothing in terms of forces. It reminded me a lot of Grizzly at California's Great America, a very mild ride with shallow drops. It wasn't rough, so I could have gone around for more rides had it not started pouring rain shortly afterwards. So, when I get back to Frontier City, I'll be sure to ride this again. But for now, I don't have a high opinion on Wildcat. My number 2 best new credit is Wonder Woman Golden Lasso Coaster at Six Flags Fiesta, Texas. I rode 2 RMCs for the first time this year, and spoiler alert, they're both top the best side of this list. Wonder Woman is definitely the weaker of the two, but still one of the most intense coasters I've ever ridden. Plus, these Raptors have the best pacing for any coaster model I've ever seen. Sure, it's over before you know it, and the restraints are pretty much trash, but those 2 critiques aside, Wonder Woman is aggressive, has very powerful ejector airtime, and has a great setting over the water despite it having the McDonald's colors. Seriously, how has this not been claimed as the world's largest French fry? My number 1 worst new credit is the Gauntlet at Magic Springs. 3 letters, SLC. Those letters bring panic to coaster enthusiasts across the globe, and for good reason. Some are better than others, but this is not one of them. It's not the worst, but thanks to the classic bulky SLC restraints that sit right next to your ears, this isn't one of the better ones either. If it had the vests like on Riddler's Revenge at Six Flags New England, it would be tolerable, but it doesn't. Oddly enough, Gauntlet has a redesigned wheel assembly to try to provide a more comfortable ride, but anything short of changing the trains to the vests is useless. My number 1 best new credit is Twisted Cyclone at Six Flags Over Georgia. This RMC is short but sweet. It's way too short to be a top tier RMC, but the elements it has are amazing. Starting with the first drop with the sick head chopper, the reverse cobra roll, the wave turn with great sustained ejector. Then the rest of the ride has great ejector error moments and another inversion for good RMC fun. It may not be RMC's best coaster, but Twisted Cyclone is my favorite new credit I picked up in 2020. So those are my top 5 best and top 5 worst new credits I got in 2020. Let me know what you think of this list, and tell me some of your best and worst new credits. I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Also be sure to give this video a like, and please consider subscribing for more roller coaster and amusement park content here on the Quackens Coaster channel. Thank you for watching.